Today we're going to do a watercolor study, and it's about shapes and choosing values. And there's a landscape picture I took the past weekend. But the first decisions I have to make is, what can I eliminate? How can I simplify that scene? And where are the values? The starting point is to make a thumbnail sketch. And we're going to go over this and do several discussions about it. Hi, this is Everett, Everett's Watercolors. Welcome to my classroom. Now here I am in my studio, ready for today's broadcast. And I'm broadcasting to throughout the USA and around the world. My wife Gloria is in the studio with me today.
Hello.
And she'll be monitoring the broadcast and also the chat room. The chat room's live, so if you have any comments or questions, please write them down and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If this is the first time for you to look in on my broadcast, I'd appreciate making comments. Give me a like, subscribe to my channel. I'll be back here every week on Thursday. And also refer me to your friends if you like what's going on. So today I'm going to do a little study on a watercolor study, but I think it'll be an important point about shapes and values. And I think those will help you anyone organize their paintings and get started. So let me go over to my painting table and let me get started. Okay, I'm going to turn on the light up here. Okay, first things here, a couple little changes from last time. Yeah, this is my little information board here, everettswatercolors.com. That's my website. And on my website, you can get in, you can see my art supply list in there to buy art supplies, the things you see today on the program. I have a list of classroom videos on there on my website, and also Fun with Watercolors, which is where you'll have a copy of today's picture and drawing that I'll be describing today. And this is the QR code, and all you do is point your cell phone camera at that, and that will take you right to my website directly. Okay. I'll also have the links to all those items on my website on this video today. They'll be in the video description today. Also, I've added another link on my website. It'll take you to my Everett's Watercolors art group on Facebook. And right there on the left side of the Fun with Watercolors page, there's another QR code, which will take you to my Everett's Watercolor art group right directly to Facebook. And there you can download your painting if you're painting along with me, and give me an opportunity to make some comments and give you some thoughts on what I think. So I appreciate you doing that. Anyway, that's a little administrative business here today. This is the photograph that I took last weekend. And I was looking for a subject matter. And I think that's probably the first things that most artists have a problem with is, what do I want to paint today? Or what can I paint? Well, find things that you're interested in, and also find something that's may attract your attention. Well, this here is a little landscape scene. And I like to do landscapes. Landscapes is one of my favorite subjects. Not the only thing, but I do like to paint landscapes. And I found this area here, but then I had to look really around to find out what interests me at all. Because it is a busy scene. There's a lot of trees, and I've done trees before, but I want to do something even a little bit different than that. So what could I do? Let me bring this photograph over to my close-up camera. And as I zoom in on this, first of all, there's the big tree. Well, that's not very interesting because it's a big tree, but and the trunk itself is just like a telephone pole straight. I looked off here to the right, there's a little bush right here. That little bush right there. And it has a beautiful shape to it. Very interesting shape. It's different than the other one next to it. So that was the thing that really interested me, was this little bush over here, right there. This is what attracted my attention. Okay, so let's go back to my painting table. So let's talk about how you organize to get started for a painting. I'm going to take a pencil here, and that's just a plain sheet of paper. The first shape you got to think about is, okay, the shape of your painting. Well, if I'm doing a landscape, I'll probably do a landscape format, which is length is long and shorter on the top. So your first shape you worry about is the shape of your painting. Is it landscape or is it portrait, which is vertical? And the next thing you want to do is divide. You have to divide this space up. The first division would be, okay, where's the horizon line? Well, in relation to the subject matter, you want to have the horizon line either higher or lower, not in the middle. And so therefore, you start with a point that you want to start putting the horizon line in. That's the first thing you do. Well, that divides yourself into two spaces. And then you have this large space up here. And usually you have a background and the sky factor here. So you need to divide that one up a little bit. So here, this is where you might cut it up to do into another length here. So the horizon line is usually 1/3 from the bottom, or it could be 2/3 from the bottom. 1/3 or 2/3. That's usually a good rule, or a good rule of thumb. But here I have three spaces. I have the horizon line and a space below, which is called the foreground. And then you have the horizon on up, which is the middle ground area. And then behind that would be the background. So there are three areas in a landscape or on any painting. You have a foreground, something's in front. You have a middle ground area, which is something in the middle of the middle of the area. Then you have something in the background. Even on a still life, you would have something in the foreground, you'd have something on a table, and then in the background you have a wall or something else. So even on a still life, you would have the same three ranges or three areas: foreground, middle ground, background. All right, now, so once you get that down, then so this picture here, I started looking at that and I said, okay, what is my foreground? Well, the first thing I did was I took my little travel set, Everett's Watercolors travel set, which has a visual journal. It also has a spray bottle, Everett's watercolor spray bottle, dot sprayer, palette in a bottle, and with just water. And then I have a small travel palette, which has primarily a yellow, red, and blue colors, and then a couple travel brushes, which is I have a number 8 round and a 1/2 inch flat. Okay, those are silver brush. So those I carry with me all the time when I go out looking for subject matter or go out to do a painting. So what I did here was in my visual journal, I took this scene here and I drew a simple, what I call a thumbnail sketch or a quick sketch. And I have that large tree, and I made the tree look a little better. This tree just has a straight trunk on it, like a telephone pole. So I wanted to be a little bit different. And with all the foliage on it, I could still see the limbs in there, but it was all covered with foliage. So I took the foliage off and just described the limbs. Okay. Then over here is where I put that little bush that I was really interested in. This is the one that had the most interesting shape over here. Okay. So those were the things that I decided to get started on. Now in the background, there was a lot of trees back here. So I went and found generally, forgot the top trees I didn't really worry about. It was the trees behind the bush and sort of the middle ground area. So I decided that would be an area that would be a background mass of trees behind this area. So that would be my middle ground. So my foreground was here with the bush and the tree. Middle ground would be this row of trees behind here, and then the background would be the sky. And see, the sky is very simple. Here is just plain blue, bluish gray back here. Okay, so that's how I came up with my basically design drawing for the sketch. Now, before I left the scene, along with my visual journal, I also have a watercolor pad, which has a 140-pound watercolor in it. And this is a 5x7 sheets of paper, and very nice. So I have both of these. And here I did a quick watercolor sketch, just a quick watercolor sketch. And here I captured the small bush and the large tree. I got some other trees in the background just to give me some ideas what was there. So here it was a little practice painting I did on location, looking at the subject matter. So collecting information while you're on location to do a painting is very important, besides taking photographs. So there, while I was there, I decided what my subject matter was going to be. I decided how I was going to lay it out. But I still wasn't really convinced about the values and actually the final colors. That's what we're going to talk about today. How do I decide what values I'm going to use in the painting? Well, what does that really mean? Let's go. Let me show you what my next step is. I'll have to set this aside. So what I did, I took the sketch. I took the sketch here that I did on location. That was my design sketch. And then I copied it. I copied it on regular. I just put it on my copier and just did a printout on a regular piece of printer paper. And then I darkened it up a little bit so I make sure I saw it. And then I transferred that to a piece of transfer paper. This is a copy paper, okay? Tracing paper. So I just took that over the sketch and just copy that off of there. Then I took this to my light board, and then I put this is 140-pound watercolor paper, and this happens to be a quarter sheet. And this diagram happens to be about a 5x5 size drawing. So I was able to put several copies of this on this. So I put this on my light board, and on top of that I put my watercolor paper, and then of course I could trace it through here. So I traced the design onto my watercolor. Now you can do the same thing. You can take your sketch here on tracing paper and go up to a window during the daytime and put this against the window, and then put your paper up against the window with that in the background, and you'll see the light coming through. So you have an already built-in light board using the window with the light coming through, okay, during the daytime. And that's another way. I've done that several times myself. So what I did was, I took this drawing and I transferred it to the watercolor paper. Now I did 6 versions. I did 6 versions of that, but they're not very dark, but you can see I did 6 copies of that. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I did 6 copies of this. So by copying it off, then I was able to trace it and then get 6 copies very quickly. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to treat each one of these with a different set of values. And let me go through this. A value pattern is where your lights and darks are. So let's talk about values. The 3 values, there's probably 1,000 values that you'll see when you look at a picture. But the 3 values I'm talking about is the principal ones: the light value, the middle value, and the dark value. 3 values: light, middle, dark. And that's almost like the same thing about sizes. You have small, medium, and large sizes. So the rule of 3 is a very important characteristic in art. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some color now. The brushes I'm using today are Holbein. This is a 3/4 inch synthetic brush by Holbein. This is the 1/2 inch synthetic brush, flat. These are both flats. And then I have a number 4 rigger. These are all synthetic brushes, but very nice. I carry these with me a lot on go plein air and also in my studio. I use them just about every week. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some paint. Now you can use any color you want, but I know I'm going to use light, middle, dark. So I'm going to use one color, but I'm going to use a darker color. So the darker colors of my palette. I'm going to use alizarin crimson. That's a nice dark color, nice dark red. But I'm going to mix it in with a little bit of Payne's gray. Just a little bit, just to darken it even more. So I want a dark red, reddish color. And it'll be basic, it'll turn out to be purple because Payne's gray has a lot of purple in it. So that's going to be my dark value. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to paint in my darks. So up here on this first one, on this first sketch, I'm going to put in the dark value. I'm going to put the dark value in the middle ground. So I'm going to put the dark value in the middle ground. Those middle ground trees that I saw. So I'm going to put the dark value. So I'll put this in here, and I'm going to sketch this in right behind the. Remember the foreground. The foreground is where the tree is. So I'm going to paint around the tree limbs and everything. So this is a little bit of negative painting behind the drawing. But what I'm doing, I'm just painting the value dark behind this foreground. So this is the middle ground. Let me go in a little bit. Now finish up this little design here with a tree. Now you don't have to be, you don't have to do a very careful. I'm trying to be careful. I want it to look a little bit neater for the presentation here. But you just want to get what you're doing. You're studying. This is a study, so you just want to get an idea. You want to get an evaluation of what you should have, of light and dark values. Okay, then on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing. On the other side of the tree, the middle ground is right behind the tree. So I'm going to put the middle ground here, this middle ground row of trees. And they were all shapes and sizes. There were 50 trees behind here, different colors of green and brown. And there was even a little bit of red bush back there too. There's a little bit of reddish foliage on it, the bush. But I just decided not to go there with that one. It wasn't as interesting. I found that right there in front of my eyes was this light green bush, yellow green bush, and there was a dark background behind it. So this is basically what I saw: light against dark. So that was the first thing that attracted me. Number one was not only the color and the position, but also the shape. The shape of it, very interesting. It had a nice irregular edge, a lot of pointy points, a lot of small and large little shapes on it. So it really was an interesting little shape there. Even though it was the smallest thing in that picture, this is one of the smaller items there. But it's the one that caught my eye. And that's what you look for. You look for something that is interesting and something that would be interesting not only to paint, but also that would be attractive enough to have in a painting. So that's the first part. You can always make up items, but you find something in nature, in its habitat, it's even more interesting. When you find something that's there, and it's not something you made up. It's something that was really there. But what I'm making up now is the actual the colors, and there was dark behind this item. So I'm carefully going around this because this is part of the presentation here, to get a nice view here. And when you're at home doing the painting, you have all the time you want to take. I'll speed this up as quickly as we can here. And also in between, there was these little branches. It was little branches of this bush that were up from the ground up. I'll put those in. They were interesting too. They were different. They were different sizes. They were also different shapes. So I'm always looking for a variety of shapes and sizes to make things interesting. Okay. All right. So this first sketch, I'll call this number one. Sketch number one. It's got a dark middle ground. dark middle ground. Now, as long as I've got the dark paint in my brush, I'm going to do another sketch down here. At the this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 5, I'm going to do a dark foreground. So what I do here is I'll start out with the foreground area. So let me swear my paint out. So I'm down here on the sketch number 5. I'm not going to do all of it. I'm just going to do 2. I'm going to do 2. I'll do this one. I did the first one up here at number 5. The rest of them we'll talk about. But I want to do enough examples, enough example here for you to get the idea what I'm referring to here. Now I'm taking the same scene, the same subject matter. It's just a copy of the same drawing, and I'm changing values. Now I'm making this value in the front. Now I'm making it dark. Up here it was light. So now I'm making this value a dark value, and I'm going to make the background light. Just the opposite of what I did in drawing number 1. Because this will give me another viewpoint of just exactly how I want to do this. So now I'm going to put in, okay, I'm going to switch brushes now. I'm going to move to the rigger because it's a little smaller brush, and I can go ahead and put in the shapes a little bit better with this than a bigger brush. I can still use this for a while. Let me continue on. Get into bigger shapes here, the bigger limbs. I can do the corner of the brush. So this half-inch, I'm using a half-inch brush because it's a very small sketch. But I'm going to do enough of it here for you to get the idea how we do this. So I'm putting in the dark value on this same subject that I talked about. And this is the tree and the bush that are going to be in a dark value. In this particular drawing here, I'm making the value just the opposite. In that first drawing, the value was light. In this case, in this drawing, the value is dark. And over here, the bush is dark. Up there in the top one is light. So it's just a counter change. It's just the opposite of what I did on the first one. And that'll give us a good that'll give us a good example of two small paintings with a different value. So we're analyzing values now with the shapes. And these shapes now, and we'll talk about shapes because why did I choose the dark against, well, the middle ground is in the first painting is dark against the light foreground. So that's the highest contrast. So that's one good example of putting a dark area against a light area. It'll give you more visibility, more interest. It'll attract the eye much faster. So you can attract the eye using a higher contrast between light and dark. So that's one reason for using a dark value against a light value. The next here on this little bush has a lot of interesting sharp edges. So that's another interesting point here on this one is it has now here are these little branches now I'm putting in. And I took out, as I said, I took out the foliage on this because it was just all green and one big tree with a large. So I thought the branches were more interesting. I always enjoy branches to draw those, almost like doing a little calligraphy study here. And it also gives you an idea of how the tree is formed. I mean, it has the branches that go out, and that's where the leaves are. And so it gives you the shape. It gives you the appearance of what the shape would look like. And down here, these little up here where I left them white. Down here, I'm going to make the little trunks and the little branches down here are going to be dark.
We have a question. Do you hold the brush differently in order to do the tree branches?
Well, okay. The question was holding the brush in different angles. Uh, everyone just like when you do just like when you write your just write your signature or do your drawings. When you draw with a pencil or with any kind of instrument, you're gonna hold that instrument what's comfortable for you. And when I hold the brush with the smaller brush like the rigger, I hold it a different way than I hold. See, the flat brush, I hold it almost like a pencil, and you can hold the brush the same way. Hold it like with a pencil, and then you just draw with it. Basically, when I paint, I'm really drawing, and when I'm drawing, I'm really painting. So it really is not much difference at all. So practice the brush strokes, and that way you'll train yourself on the best way to handle your brushes. The tree branches, there is no secret way to do it. The way you hold a rigger is don't hold it down like here like a pencil, because then you're not going to have the less control sometimes is better. This gives you a little more freedom of the brush, and it depends on how big you make the branches also. So holding a brush is something you practice. What's more comfortable for you? Is it comfortable at this end or a little bit closer? Wind up in the middle somehow. Okay. Uh, all right. Now the next value I'm going to put in is middle value. I've got the dark value on these two. So now I'm going to pick a middle value. Well, the middle value is between the light and the dark. So I'm going to take just a little bit of water and add a little bit of water to that mixture, the same mixture. And what I want to do, what I do now, I take a sheet of practice paper, and I go up here and look at the value, and that's about what I want. I'm measuring against the white, so that's about a middle value. That's about a middle value. Okay. So you mix the paint up a little bit of water, and then you add the paint to it. Now up here in drawing number one, I'm putting in with the larger brush. I'm putting in the sky. In the sky, I'm making a middle value. The sky is a middle value, and so when I can use the big brush up to a point here. I'm using the 3/4 inch brush here just to get in most of the color, especially around the borders of the tree, around the edges of the tree, and down. I can go over top of the darks and it won't matter. Okay, now I'll pick up the smaller 1/2 inch brush now and go in. Now I want to go in and I want to uh, paint in between the branches. So I'm just and again, I'm being careful because I want this to show up like the drawing. So the little pencil marks I have there show me the pencil mark gives me an idea where the branches are, and now I go ahead and put a little bit of color between the branches. So I use the edge of the brush. Here I'm holding the 1/2 inch brush just almost like a pencil, but I'm painting with the corners of the brush. I'm painting with the edge of the brush. So really, what part of the brush you're using is how you hold the brush, and you hold it the way it's most comfortable for you. And you need to practice that to find out what's good for you and as far as using that brush. It becomes almost a personal way. I've been painting for so long, it just becomes natural how to pick up a brush and start painting. And the more you paint, the more natural it becomes. So you don't think about it anymore. You just do it. But you hold the brush so you have control over the painting. You have control over the paintbrush, control over the stroke. You also want to cover the paper properly. You want to paint around, in this case, I'm being careful going around the lines I made. Now, when I say light value, it's really a light value area. It can be middle light. It can be it's between the dark and between the light. So you can have a mixture of different values, and the middle range is quite flexible what the value is. It can be darker, it can be lighter. In this case here, because the weight of the paper is the lightest, you can't get any lighter than that. So I'm pretty safe here doing this value study. This pattern number 1 is 3 values, light, middle, and dark. And I've got the light background. Excuse me. I got the dark background of the trees. I got the middle ground. The sky is the background, which is a middle value, and the foreground is the light. I left out the white paper. That's the easiest way to put 3 values down. You just need to put two colors down: a light and a dark, or a light and a medium. The light is already white of the paper, so that's the simplest way to talk about it. The light value is the white of the paper. The middle value is the lighter value of the color, and then the dark value is the darkest value you can make out of that color you're doing. Now, I'm using a alizarin crimson with a little bit of Payne's gray to darken it up, give me a nice dark red. I could use any color I want to. Make sure it's dark. If you don't have a dark enough pigment, you won't get any variation between the values. So you need something that'll give you variation between between the middle and the light and the dark values. Okay, one more little spot. And I'm trying to go slow here because I want you to see a little bit of the technique of doing this and also the actual results. Okay, so in drawing number 1, I have a 3 value study with a 3 value pattern. I have the middle value in the sky. I have the dark value in the background of the trees, or middle ground of the trees. Excuse me, the background of the sky. Excuse me, background is the sky, which is middle value. The middle ground is dark, which is the tree line, and then the foreground, which is the forward portion, and the tree and the bush is a light value. Okay, so now down here, I'm going to add the light. I'm going to add I got the dark and the light here, so I'm going to add the middle value in. So it's the same thing. It's the, and because I have this will be a little easier to paint because all I have to do is put the sky in. The sky is going to be a light. So I've got the dark foreground, the light middle ground, and now I'm going to have a middle value background, which is the sky. So I've already done the tree, so I can go over this very quickly because it is. And all I want to do is leave the middle ground white because that's going to be the light value now. Is the middle ground. The middle ground now is light, a light value, which I'll leave the white paper. The background is the middle value, so that's why I'm painting it in right now. And we already did the foreground in the dark. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let's analyze this real now. I've got two value studies here going on. I wanted the first decision was this is my focal point was this little bush here. This is my interest here. It was here in both of these diagrams. So I took the contrast between the dark and the light. That's why I wanted to put the dark and the light against this area that I'm interested in. That's why I chose this. And down here is the dark against the light in my area, my focal points here. So the dark value against the light value is here also. So these two values are a candidate now for this particular painting I want to paint. This little bush is my interest, my focal point. I want the highest contrast in that area. And here we have it, light against dark. Up here, dark against light. Okay. The background value, which is the sky, is the same in both. It's like a middle value, even though these colors are a little bit different apart, but they're still in relation to the scheme here. This is a middle value compared to the other two values. This is the middle value compared to these other two values. So middle value sky with a light and dark with the foreground or the middle ground. Okay, so that's my plan. But I had four other plans over here, but I'm not going to do all those. But let me show you what I did. In preparation for the class, I did the same approach, but I did it in a different color. Here I did it in ultramarine blue. Here's that for number one. Here's the dark background with the light foreground. Area of interest right here, with the middle ground with the middle value in the background. And down here, in number 5, is the dark foreground against the light middle ground, with the middle ground in the sky. Okay, that's what I did this in a different color. Now, but look at the other. I have 4 other options. Here I've got a dark sky, a dark background against a light middle ground against a middle tone foreground. Up here I have a light background against a middle tone middle ground and against a dark foreground. Here I have a dark background against a middle tone background against a light foreground. And last but not least, I have a light background against a dark middle ground against a light or middle tone foreground. So really, in this particular scheme of deciding what values you want to use for which area, you really have 6 options. And my basic philosophy here is you can really paint anything using this value plan or values pattern. You can do still life, you can do portraits, you can do landscapes, seascapes, skyscapes, anything using this value planning. Okay, 3 values, 3 areas: background, middle ground, foreground. Okay, so that's what I came up with, and that's the way I approached this particular color study. And it came out with the design. Now let me show you. I did a color study of this particular. I used number 1 up here. I did a color study using number one value plan. Now I did a quick video. I did as I was doing it. I recorded it exactly. Now I didn't cut anything of it out. I started right from scratch to ending, but I sped it up very fast. So it takes about 5 minutes. But I want to show it to you. This is the value. This is the color study of that particular value study. So this value study up here, with the middle ground, middle ground in the dark and the foreground in the light. That's what I painted in a color. I did a color study. So let me run that for you, please. Now I'm going to be talking through the discussion here. So there's my hate brush I'm using here. I'm using the hate brush a lot here for coloring in, and or for the color study. And I chose number 1 value pattern, which I described, with a light foreground and a dark background. And the light value is going to be light value. I'm using a little bit of yellow ochre mixed in with a little bit of burnt sienna. And it's a light value. The light value for the little bush is going to be lemon yellow with a little bit of ultramarine blue to give me a green. And then I mixed up a little darker brown, a little bit of burnt sienna mixed in with a little bit of ultramarine to give me a darker brownish look, but still a light value. And here I'm using the rigger brush to put in the branches. Remember now, this is the light value. This is the foreground. I'm doing a light value of this particular color study. So this is the light value in the foreground. So even though it's browns and greens and so forth, it's still a light value because color, depending on how you paint it, is also a value, lights and darks. And you can lighten it up by adding more water. Now I add a little more green here into the landscape here because I wanted to not just have that one green bush stuck out there by itself. So add a little more green here to the foreground. So this is the foreground level of the painting in a light value color mixture. Here I'm using a rigger brush to go ahead and put that grass in. Now I add a little more mixture to the front, and I use my credit card, and I want to add some texture to the foreground. So here I scraped out some of rock formations to break up that landmass down there to give it a little interest and to show a little extra in the foreground. It's still a light value. All right, now I mixed the dark value, which is a combination of Lisbon crimson. I put in ultramarine blue, a little bit of Payne's gray, even some burnt sienna. I made a nice dark mix. And here I'm using the 3/4 inch flat brush, and I'm painting around those branches just like I did when I did the value study. Now this is a quarter sheet of watercolor paper, so it's a lot larger than those little 5x5 sketches I was showing you with the value study. This is a full quarter sheet watercolor piece of paper. Here I'm using the edge of the brush and the corner of the brush to do a little bit of the grass edges at the bottom. So I'm continuing on with the middle ground with that dark. Here I'm using the 1/2 inch flat in a smaller area. Also keeping the value dark. And I changed the color a little bit. Add a little more ultramarine in here. So I'm altering the colors also, a little more black from the Payne's gray. And I'm also adjusting the color on the left side to make sure that the colors are matching as far as the value. I want to keep that value dark across the middle area of the painting, the middle ground. And here I'm painting a little negative painting behind the little grass strokes there at the bottom. And here I'm going to paint around that green bush. And I'm still using the 1/2 inch flat, using the corner of the brush, the edge of the brush to give me the nice sharp edges. So I'm painting this one just like I did the value study, but now I'm using different colors. And now I've added the dark level now behind the light level. So I have the light level painted in with colors. Now I'm adding in the dark value in with colors. And here I'm doing some negative painting around those little branches at the bottom of the bush, little small trunks that are on the bottom of that bush. They're really little branches. A nice, interesting design. I really like that design. It came out very interesting on that. Little negative painting there. Now the last area is the sky, and it's going to be middle value. And I've decided to use blue as the color. But one of the problems here I have to do is make sure that that value is darker than the value of the foreground. Remember, I'm trying to get a middle value, compare. So I'm comparing that blue with the value I have of the tree there, for example, to make sure it has a darker value. Now here I'm also going to put a graded wash because I want to do a dark at the top and light at the bottom of the sky to give a little depth in the sky. Dark to light value in the sky. Not a flat value, but a dark to light value. So I pre-wet the sky area with the middle-sized hake. Put the water down and pre-wet the sky. And I'm using a small hake now to add in some of the blues around the edges of the sky. Then I'm using a quill. Use the quill brush loaded with the blue paint now to go between the branches. Gives me a little more control, and for smaller spaces, it's a little easier to use for tight areas. Use the quill brush. Here now I'm adjusting that blue value now. The blue value I want to be darker than the value of that tree. So that's why I'm adding a little more value, a little more pigment there in the sky. And I go back and add a little bit more. I'm adjusting the value of that sky against that light tree trunk. Okay, I'll bring you back to the painting table. Okay, now let me take you to the painting now. I've done this value sketch, I've done the value study. Now let's take you to the actual painting. Okay, this is the finished painting I did that I showed you the video of. Okay, and one of the problems is that the sky and the trunks are pretty close in value. That's one of the things I have to look at. Now this is a nice contrast here between the background, the middle ground, and the foreground. It's nice dark against light, and against the yellow green bush. That turned out real good. But what I can do, and see the sky, how it turned out. There's a gradation in the sky. The skies tend to get a little bit warmer as they come down toward the ground, so that's why this is lighter and it's darker at the top. Okay, and what I've been thinking about here to show the demonstration of this is I could let me take the regular brush and mix up a little bit of darker value of that brown. So I'm using ultramarine, using burnt sienna with a little bit of yellow ochre, and see, I'll get a little test sheet here. Always want to test out your color before you put them on the painting. So what I've decided I want to do now is I'm going to add a little more value to the top, these limbs, not the whole thing, just the top branches. So I've decided to go ahead and add in. I'm going to put just a little bit of ultramarine blue in with that, just to darken up just a little bit more. So I'm adding a little bit of ultramarine blue to that brown, make it a darker brown. So I'm going to go in here now, and I'm going to let's see what I'll do first. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to add a little bit of water to the branch. Let's take this. I'm going to take this branch right here. I'm going to add water to the branch, plain water, and then I'm going to a loaded brush, and I'm going to lay it in there and just let the paint float. Just let it float on top of that water, a wet mixture. I just put water on top of that branch. Just let it float down. So what I'm doing now is I'm putting in I'm putting a dark against the light up here. I'm putting a dark branch against a lighter sky color. And I'm going to come down here, and then I'm going to lighten it up down here. I want it to be light against the background, which it already is. Okay. So let me do another one. So I'm really experimenting here. This is the experiment. It's experimenting this particular thing. I didn't have to change this. I could have left it alone. It read okay, but I want to see if this makes any difference. Oh, I dropped a little bit here in the sky. Bring the sloppy brush over, full of paint. Okay, so I'm putting a darker color in here against. I'm really darkening up these branches against that lighter sky. I really want to pull this tree away from the sky. I want to separate, and the only way I can separate it is by changing the value. And I can take this and move it on up. Make it on up. Make it run it off a little bit higher. Because when I put the mat board around it, it'll cover that area up. So that half inch or so at the top will be covered by the mat board. So I'm adding a little bit of this is called counter change. I'm putting light against dark and dark against light. That's all I'm doing. And you'll see this in a lot of painting, even the masters. You'll see a lot of uh, counter change. You'll see lights against darks and darks against lights. So it is a good way to bring out a certain point in the painting uh, to give it a little more contrast. Separate the two branches. I'm separating the tree from the sky is what I'm doing. And here what I'm going to do is going to blend this out here down here. I'm going to blend this out. So I just take the rigger brush and just let it float. I think I'll put a little more paint. So let me finish up here. I'll go quickly now. You can see what I'm doing. I'm going to finish up these two additional branches here. Add a little water to the branch and come in and pick up a little color. And I think I'm seeing already an improvement here to the design. I think I see a little more contrast up here in this part of the painting that I think it needed. Because otherwise, the tree, this is what happens to a lot of paintings, is that if you get two values that are so close to each other, you lose the object. What I mean is you can't see one object from the other because they blend, the values are so close and similar. But this way, I'm making sure that these values are separate. I'm making one darker and one lighter. I could have made the sky much darker, but I think I'd have defeated the purpose of the sky being light and sunshine out. So I think it makes more sense to make the limbs darker. And I could put foliage up here. I could add foliage to the top of the tree. I could make this into a shadow pattern from the foliage. So there's all kinds of ways of doing this. Okay, almost done here. Add this last limb in. I'm playing with a rigger brush. I'm holding the rigger brush about halfway. A little more control, but I don't want to be down at the end like a pencil. And I made a mistake here. I don't want to put that color there. It's too far down. Okay. That was the boo boo. I wanted to see you catch that. I put the dark on this section. I don't want to go down. I don't want to fight the dark of the background or the middle ground. The middle ground is already dark. I don't want to come anywhere near that. So I come down here. Now while it was still wet, I was able to pick it up with a towel, with a tissue. So that's why a tissue is very or a towel very handy to have. If you painted in a section and something's not going right, you got the wrong color or the wrong value, or you got water on the paper, then the best thing to do is take it out. Just pick it up with a clean tissue. Okay, so here I'm finishing this up here, but I want you to see this. I think you see the difference in the contrast here now between the branches of the tree and the sky. And we definitely have okay. And also what I want to do here, I'll add maybe a touch over here. I'm going to use some of this Payne's Gray with my rigger brush. And I'm going to add in a few little branches in here off of these. Add a little branch inside of this. Here, just a little bit. Probably didn't need that one here. Okay. Now another thing I want to demonstrate here a little bit is that while actually let me put the blow dryer on that. Make sure it's nice and dry. So what I did was I decided to go ahead and make darker limbs on the tree to contrast with the a little bit lighter value of the sky. And see if that works. This is experimental. Okay, now one last thing I want to demonstrate here is that I can also, in the background here, or in the middle ground. Let's say in the middle ground. In the middle ground here, I can also add in some more interest. I'm going to pick one area in here. Let's say right next to this here area here. I'm going to take a brush with just water in it, and I'm going to put a tree, a background. So I'm going to put the trunk in, and maybe a branch. And let it sit for about 10 seconds. What that activates the paint. I want to blot it with a towel and pick another section, and I'm going to rub it out. So I can do some lifting. I can do a little bit of lifting on the background. I can do a little lifting on the background and bring out some trees. Okay, so that's just a really demonstration on that. Let's put a mat board around that.
We have a comment that they like the texture of your ground.
I'm sorry, this comment?
Like the texture in the ground, the brown.
Oh, the rocks. Yes, yes. I think that makes. You want to make as much each part of the painting. You want to try to make a little different mark or different interesting textures is very important. Okay. So I think what I did by adding the dark here to the tree, I think that really brought the tree forward. It pushed the sky back, it brought the tree forward, and the contrast here between the middle ground and the tree brought it forward. And so it really made it come a little bit easier to see as far as the location, because I want to identify where is this object located in the landscape. It's forward. Everything else is back. So the background here is behind, it's dark, and even the sky, which is lighter, is pushed back. And of course, my focal point here, which is this light green bush, still stands out to be the brightest, the lightest against the darkest right here. And the colors are very different. You got green against the darks. The yellow is the lightest color against the darkest blues of the painting. Okay, that was that section. Now I want to show you one more thing. I took the drawing. Remember the drawing I started with, the sketch? That's the sketch I started with, was the small sketch I did on location. And I put this on a copier, and I said, well, what if I leave it alone the way it was and just add a bigger section back here behind the bush? Because if you look at the design, remember I talked to you about areas? This area here is almost the same as this area here as far as size. I've got a large area for the foreground, which is the tree and the bush. But the middle ground, which goes from here to here, is almost the same as here to here. And that's another thing you want to watch about, is the size of the shapes, the shape of those value areas. So I took this opportunity to say, okay, well, I got the large foreground, but I can increase the size of the middle ground and make it larger than the sky. That way I've got 3 separate areas that are different sizes. So I did another quick color study, and I'm not going to do any more with this, just show you what happened. So I took this value here, I took this tree here, and I put another tree in behind. So what I did here was I decreased the amount of space back here. I increased the space here in the middle ground by adding these trees here. Added middle ground trees to increase that size in comparison with the size of the sky. And of course, I changed the foreground a little bit. I made it green grass instead of rocks. So that's the difference of the foregrounds. So whenever I do a painting, I make different changes. I don't want to paint the same painting or do the same thing on each one. I kept the objects the same, but I made everything around them a little bit different. Okay, I think this also works. I think this works a little better by adding a little more shape here in the middle ground, away from everything else, and also adds more interest here to the focal point. which is the little green bush, for focal point. Okay, and I can put the mat around that also. I mean, the mat always makes it look a little better. I always like to show with a mat. Now, I didn't do anything with the tree. I could add the dark to the tree, but I think there's enough lights here, and I think there's enough emphasis over here. I don't want to put any more. I want all your emphasis over here. So the least emphasis I put over here is more important. I want more over here. If I put too much emphasis on the tree here, it takes away from the focal point. For example, you see here, when I did this, it brought your eye over here more, took you away from this, which is where I want you to go. I want you to go here. That's my focal point. So by doing this, I added the background in to bring you in here more and lower this, and left the intensity over here between the tree and the sky, left it alone. Therefore, your eyes will come into here. Okay. All right, just a couple of good points to bring out as far as the lessons go. Let me turn this off. Yeah, let's go back to the main camera. Okay. I've been teaching art for a while. I've been teaching, I have a lot of students in the past and so forth. And so when I get started on painting and talking about the art, I go into some details that are probably beyond some of your thinking right now. And I hope that, if you read some books and maybe look at some more of my videotapes, I think you can pick up more information about how I came to some of those points that I did today. Some of them are very repeatable. Some of them I've used before. Some I've probably never used them the same way. I try to always bump it up a little bit and do something different and add a little more information than I did before, or put it in a different way. I'll say that. I usually say it a different way. Okay, well, today's lesson or description or demonstration was on shapes of the sky, the middle ground, and the foreground, and the shapes of the objects, elements, and how do you paint the values in there to make those elements really stand out. And I think with the value study I showed, I think there's a lot of good information there for you to try and for you to experiment on. And I hope you'll try out something and put it on my Facebook page, and let me see what you think, and give me some comments, and give me some likes. Okay, I'll be back again next week on Thursday at 2 o'clock. So we'll see you next Thursday.